Hello everyone, and welcome to game number 3 in our best of 3. This is going to be the rubber match between Gameslayer and SorenJohnson for our 3rd place in this second Offworld tournament. Once again, reveal map on. Once again, it looks like we're going to have a lot more similar to the first game, where there are not a lot of resources. There is certainly a scavenger spot available with decent access to water, aluminum, silicon, not too far away. I'm hoping these players are going to end up fighting over that. Whereas for iron, we're seeing a lot of high iron tiles that are kind of usable, but then a lot of low iron tiles that are less so. It's a bit of an awkward situation for everybody is what it looks like this game. But we'll just have to see what these players decide. That's slowly creeping on down. Somebody's going to have to take that scavenger spot, and somebody's going to probably take an expansive up in this area, possibly a scientific, although that would be a little bit awkward. We'll just see what each of these players decide on. Okay. Going back down to 0 dead again. Everybody just kind of wanting to sit around and wait before actually getting founded. Soren is going to take the scavenger, Gameslayer the expansive. No big surprise there. So we'll have to see. Unfortunately, looks like nobody has taken up the aluminum yet. Who's going to get into the aluminum first? This is an all-important play that these players both kind of don't make happen immediately for some reason. Whoa, and suddenly an aluminum cell going down. In fact, Gameslayer has taken aluminum and iron at the start of the game. He's going to have 3 a second. So interestingly enough, he sold down aluminum rather than buying it up. When his opponent, and that allowed Soren to kind of get into it again. There was just a whole lot of buying and selling going on right in there. I think Gameslayer, hoping to get into all the steel he would need as fast as possible. Maybe not considering that his opponent had not yet purchased the aluminum. I don't know. Everything was a bit awkward. I have no idea who came out on top in all of that, but it looks like Soren will be the one to push to the upgrade first, at least. So he's going to have a slight edge, but his opponent, once again, yeah, for like half a second he had an edge. Gameslayer will have the extra claim here. Interestingly enough, Soren fast enough on the draw that he manages to take this medium water tile. Certainly Gameslayer would have liked to have access to that. Gameslayer now establishing his steel production. Standard thing to do when you're expansive. Obviously, 2 extra claims for Gameslayer right now. He's going to just grab a little bit of water with one of them. We'll have to see where he commits the last one. Soren, on the other hand, doing very, very standard scavenger-based play. He's got some carbon established. He's now moving into water and silicon with 1 claim left. This could go into something like power. This could go into something like aluminum, although I don't expect that. I don't really expect it to go into carbon. This 1 claim kind of left hanging at this stage is always a bit awkward to figure out. Another option is just to take a little additional water, but long term that might not work out. He could even just very simply go into a farm if he wanted. Pirate auction, so let's see where this lands. I mean, it's difficult to judge pirates in this state of the game. Just right now, 18,000 over to Gameslayer is what we're going to do with them. He's actually choosing to steal Soren's carbon, which could almost push Soren to using that last claim on an additional carbon quarry, given he'll have a little bit of trouble getting all of this in. But still, it shouldn't be the end of the world for Soren. He's producing a large amount of carbon. Even having 200 of it stolen away shouldn't completely destroy his game. A glass furnace is actually going to be what Soren puts down as his single tile for the time being. I suppose that could work out. He already has the silicon coming in. It's not a whole lot of silicon being consumed, but it's also just not very efficient production, so I don't know exactly how it's all going to pan out for Soren. Let's see, where's Soren's cash really coming from? If he can't sell down his carbon, he's probably going to want to be selling carbon as rapidly as he can right now, just to make sure his opponent doesn't sell it ahead of time, because if Soren lets that happen, what ends up happening is he ends up in a position where he is unable to effectively buy up the glass for an upgrade. It's possibly why he went into this glass furnace, which is thankfully for him making money for the time being. But we'll have to see how long that holds true, given that oxygen's price is going to just continue to rise and he's still on just a single furnace. Gameslayer will be the first to push to HQ level 3, has not sold down the carbon yet that he acquired, at least, yeah, not any of it, it looks like. Still likely 80 carbon left to steal. that has been put to a stop for the time being. I don't know. A lot of lucky rolls for Soren right now is what it looks like. Soren's not far behind HQ level 3, but really not where you want to be up against an expansive player. We're going to really want to see some black market effects coming out of Soren before long, given that he is Scavenger, but first he's going to have to find a way to effectively make money. Glass furnaces are coming down, which will help with that, but his opponent already into all of the water production he could possibly want. That's going to be a bit of a concern for Soren, making $57 a second on these reactors and $90 a second almost off of all of that food. One claim left for Soren. I would kind of hope to see this be committed to water. Carbon might also be an option, but if you pay attention, you can see that his opponent is consuming 6 water a second from tiles and then an additional 0.3 from his HQ. Then he is being forced to buy all of that, period. He cannot help it, he cannot stop it, as long as he has these tiles on the line. And so you hope to see a commitment to additional water being purchased. More pirates coming out on day 2. Once again, kind of hard to judge exactly how much these are worth. Silicon for the moment being the most valuable thing to steal, but we know water's being driven up in price effectively right now, right? A lot of water being purchased up, and so it would not surprise me for these pirates to get taken and then held for when water gets more expensive. If Soren throws down additional water production, it could be very nice for Gameslayer to steal it. EMP drops on the aluminum and, more importantly, the reactors. That's going to be a good set of freezing, but of course Soren's glass is also frozen out. So you just have to wonder, where's his money? Where's it actually coming from that he could afford that EMP? Alright, more pirates on Carbon. Again, Carbon not really worth anything, but it does make it a little bit harder for Soren to struggle his way on up to HQ level 4. Man, look at water's price going up. It's already up to $34 a second, $35. It'll just keep creeping on up there. Soren has committed all of his claims at this point. He actually spent one on power, just trying to make sure he does not acquire a whole lot of debt at this stage of the game. I'm a little bit confused by this steal on Carbon for the time being, but I guess it's okay. It's just not really what I expected. It will steal the resources a lot faster because there are a lot more coming through this area, but ooh, a food shortage is not what Soren wants to see right now at all. That's not good. Gameslayer has managed to push himself on up to HQ level 4. Very quickly and easily. He's going to establish some additional iron production. Understandable. He's driven iron quite expensive by having additional steel mills down. More than cover his iron costs. Soren is ignoring this food shortage completely, knowing his opponent likely could have some amount stockpiled and at minimum has a lot of production down. Soren actually committed to an extra claim and then placed it in power. That kind of thing I'm not sure about. I think that was the move that just lost him the game right there. Guaranteed that he will not be able to come back. So here's my thought process there. That was $4,000 Soren desperately needed. Desperately needed to push to an upgrade. Right? He absolutely needed that money that he spent on a claim. And so he takes a claim and then he commits to not making any money off of that claim. Period. End of discussion. He's just not going to do it. And so I'm very concerned about that particular decision out of Soren. I don't think that's going to pan out for him in the long run. We do see a power surge dropping onto the water production that Gameslayer had established. A good move by Gameslayer to get that up. Also a good move by Soren to shut it down. Unfortunately freezing his own water for a short time. And think if this tile had been committed to water production instead. I mean, making something like 160 a second off the tile easily, beefing up the income on his adjacent tile, things of that nature. I don't know, guys. I'm concerned about it. Finally, we see more water coming down for Soren. Gameslayer might end up a little stuck in the mud for the moment, but he should recover fairly quickly. Unfortunately, he's still got these steel mills online, and that's a bit of a concern. These could have easily transitioned into something like chems some time ago based on this low carbon and fuel price that he had generated. They could have transitioned into even simply ice condensers. Those only costing about 10 glass right now, not that bad to establish considering water's price. And so maybe small things like that from Gameslayer could allow Soren to claw his way back in. It should also be noted that Soren, well, He hasn't been making money off of the power, but at least it's been guaranteeing him some stock value, and Gameslayer has made no such move. Only just now establishing a little bit of power production, so that's a bit of a concern for Gameslayer. How he's let his debt just kind of slide out of control, especially because we've got interest coming up in just a moment. We'll have to see how that goes. Always a risk when you establish this much water-based production that it will fall off very rapidly because you are buying up so much water. I would love to see some nukes come into play right now. That's actually what I would absolutely love to see, is just this nuke getting bought right now by either of these players. I don't care. Spend the 4,000 on it. Throw down that nuke on some of this water. I know there's ice around and there's other water available, but force your opponent into those awkward positions. Could be hilarious. Alright. Gameslayer's wind turbine actually getting mutinied instead, adding more and more and more to Gameslayer's debt. Gonna try and force him, likely not into a death spiral. It's pretty hard to death spiral out in a 1v1 these days, but we can see Gameslayer losing 2 or 3 cents of stock value a second. When he upgrades, that'll mitigate a significant amount of this, and he'll be able to push into additional buildings. But still, here we go. We can see his stock price rising very rapidly in the upgrade. We can see Soren has managed to catch up at this point through use of the black market and just all these water pumps, and he has managed to push his way to HQ level 5 at the same time as Gameslayer. So strong moves out of Soren, maybe a few mistakes out of Gameslayer, allowing Soren to catch back up in this game. Soren has also established a ridiculous amount of power production. Absolutely ridiculous. 500 a second almost on a couple of these solar panels in debt payment. He's generating almost $2,000 of debt payment a second. So we can see his debt dropping rapidly, and finally he will start to actually make some money off of all of this power. In addition to that, he has been stealing away his opponent's power, shutting it down very effectively. He could even go for another mutiny in just a moment here if he wanted to, and get complete adjacency bonuses on all of that. Lock his opponent into a position where he no longer has access to an easy way to pay off all of his debt. Would be quite interesting to see. Gameslayer pushing into almost 200,000 debt. He is establishing some additional power production in a less than ideal spot, but he will be able to easily transition that into actual resources later. And Soren's just going to start going for it now. He's got some Chem Labs online. He has 2 claims left. I would like to see him use these before really going for the kill and figuring out exactly what to do with them. But, and also I would have loved to see these glass furnaces turned off a good 3 minutes ago, something along those lines, and transitioned. So maybe a bit overeager for Soren, going for the throat. We know Soren likes to do this. He wants to finish the game, always. That's what Soren always wants to do. He tries to end it. And he frequently seems to get overeager in that. He has a claim left still. It looks like he's throwing down 1 extra Chem Lab. But these glass furnaces, he's not noticing that these need to be shut down. I think he's just too honed in on the market over here, how much money he has, how much debt his opponent has, all those kinds of things. Good things to pay attention to, but not if it's going to be costing you $200 a second because you just let your tiles run. 300 even, possibly, based on all that. It's ridiculous. Well, stock is going Soren's way during all of this, so that's nice to see. We can see he's managed to push into 5 of Gameslayer's stock. Gameslayer's only secured 3 of his own for himself. Finally with enough power online to start potentially seriously paying off debt. But we'll see how long that can continue. Alright, Soren. Also, it should be noted, Soren acquiring those pirates basically guaranteed he would not be making any money off of taking away his opponent's power anytime soon. But given that he had already been EMP'd before that happened, it was still likely a reasonable decision to make. Big EMP coming down, freezing out a lot of Gameslayer's food and water income. Soren choosing to freeze himself as part of that, but that's understandable. Still a big deal, that coming down. Oh, Soren. Soren. Let's all just think... Okay, there we go. We got it done. It was only losing $500 a second, those 4 tiles. $500 a second being lost from those. But he's noticed, he's made the transition. He's made the transition into electronics, which was honestly a bit of a questionable move. I would have almost liked to see, I think, ice condensers come down. Possibly reactors or farms even. But electronics, we can see these electronics got constructed and immediately started losing money. I think Soren not considering when he threw electronics down the fact that he was going to drive carbon's price up very high when he established this electronics production, because he had to spend 240 carbon just to get all of it on the board. And so it's really not making very much money at this point. Perhaps a bit of a misstep again out of Soren there. Let's see. Gameslayer has only managed to secure 3 of his own stock, but he is expansive. He does have an awful lot of production down, and also he has managed to make the transition into an Offworld. Of course, this will make it so that Soren's electronics production is not the end of the world for him, as it is managing to pull in some cash. Carbon still going very strong for Soren, really not seeing enough nuking this game, given how valuable these base resources have been. Soren also pulling in very valuable silicon from this high tile. It's just a lot of these base resources doing serious work for Soren in this game, with his carbon tiles, his water tiles, and his silicon tiles, rather than anything special anywhere else. Very interesting to see. Whereas Gameslayer has been relying a lot more on production, which to some degree he's been able to make work, but I don't know how long that's going to hold out, as he hasn't really been tailoring his production based on the resources his opponent is gathering in. Alright. Iron Tile's going to go over to Soren for $18,000. It's close to his base. He can maybe make some use of it, especially if he can get to another claim and kind of link it up. He can put a couple special buildings in here, potentially, and that might work out very well for him. Aluminum shortage on the way. Soren is at 83% of what he needs to take down Gameslayer this game. This black market has been doing a lot of work for him, and it just keeps pushing up as these very, very simple, convenient resources pulled straight out of the ground continue to make him a ridiculous amount of money. He's very close to the 100%. He's going to be keeping a close eye on this, one would think. This is the kind of thing Soren does, is just go out to kill his opponent. He has thrown down an ice condenser, and instead he's making transitions. I don't think he noticed exactly how close he got to finishing the game. And this transition to electronics, more electronics production, I'm still very worried about. Look at how much money Soren lost just in making that transition. He would have easily cleaned up the game right now. I'm very surprised that Soren, so intent on his opponent's stock, has instead given up and started making transitions instead of just pushing for that kill immediately. He should notice any moment that how close he managed to get. He's at the 100%. We just need to see that red button come down after a control shift down from Soren, but he's not realized yet. I don't think he knows exactly how much he has stored up in resources. Nothing crazy like energy vault going on, so the 100% should be entirely accurate about exactly how much Soren has access to. And he's just got 200 electronics sitting around doing nothing. He's making further transitions. He's allowing Gameslayer the opportunity to start actually using this Offworld, which Gameslayer has still never done, despite the fact that he did defend it. And Gameslayer, I don't know, he hasn't quite given up, but he's clearly not playing as well as he potentially could. He's just not managing to use that send. He's not managing to get resources made. Maybe not enough goon squads purchased, considering he was up against a scavenger. Soren, do me a favor. Do me a favor and hit the control shift down. You're transitioning again, Soren.
The black market is online.
Soren. 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 Come on, for me. For me. We don't have to make more transitions. This is like when you're sitting on 100 Marines and your opponent has 6 Zerglings and you're like, you know what I need to transition into? Cloaked Banshees. Oh, guys. Soren, the red button is actually there. The red button was there, Soren. You can do this. Soren's just so intent. He loves playing his game so much. He doesn't want the game to end. He's just like, look at this thing I have built. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it beautiful? I need to spend more time with it.
7,000. 8,000.
Alright, we're going to sit through this claim auction. Soren's managed to push himself back down to 92%, I want to point out. Through all of these transitions and all of these changes, he's managed to allow Gameslayer the opportunity to catch back up. He did blow up Gameslayer's Offworld at least. Gameslayer's still sitting on not a whole lot of money whatsoever. Committing completely to these farms, not making things like steel right now. There we go, some steel coming down for Gameslayer. Alright, Soren. You can do it. I believe. There's the red button again. He did it. Oh, we finally the press comes down. The game is over. Soren's going to take this series 2-1 over Gameslayer, managing to come back from that initial Game 1 loss, which was looking pretty bad for Soren at that point, managing to come back into this one despite getting off to a bit of an early deficit against Gameslayer. I think Gameslayer may be pushing in a bit too much to those water resources and not committing to enough water to prevent Soren from making a lot of money off of them. We can see water, Soren's single most valuable resource that game, earning him $177,000 just off of water. That's absolutely ridiculous. Chemicals coming in as well, making about $100,000 for Soren total. Glass not doing so hot, but it did allow Soren to hold on and push to those higher HQ levels and just hold on long enough and let Gameslayer kill himself by just driving all of Soren's prices up ridiculously high. Soren making about $100,000 on electronics, but all of that is masked by the fact that he was buying carbon the whole time, and maybe that was not the best decision. Thankfully, eventually we did see a food transition come down from Soren to help clean things up. He even went into more water production in these ice condensers. And also power doing a lot of work for Soren that game. He managed to push to it enough that he actually made money off of his solar panels. And that's a big deal. When you can make money off of power, you make a lot of money very quickly. Power generators are almost always the single most valuable tiles on the map when you're at that stage of the game and kind of that mid-game. But you have to pay off your debt first. That's the weakness of them. If you can cover for that weakness, if you can get to a point where you can ignore it because you've paid off all of your debt, then they will rapidly pull you back into the game from even a very, very bad situation. And so I think controlling that power in the mid game, combined with identifying that he needed to push into water based on what his opponent was doing, really allowed Soren to come back in and take the win away from Gameslayer, who should have had it wrapped up a bit better, but maybe just letting debt get too out of control, maybe buying up too much water. We can see 140,000 water purchased, despite the fact that he had 6 water tiles. 6 water tiles, and still purchasing 140,000 in water is not where you want to be. Not where you want to be at all. And that, I think, is what lost Gameslayer the game, and eventually the series. Alright guys, that's going to wrap